In this section, you will learn about the structure and function of the most basic unit of life, cells. A universally accepted core principle of biology, the cell theory, was formulated in 1839 and was the result of contributions by many scientists. These scientists include Robert Hooke and Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who first viewed cells under a microscope, Max Ischleiden and Theodor Schwann, who discovered that all plants and animals were composed of cells, and Rudolf Virchow, who showed that the origin of cells was the division of pre-existing cells. As microscopes improved, scientists were able to learn more about cells. Van Leeuwenhoek's microscopes allowed him to view objects 9 times larger than possible to the naked eye. The most powerful microscopes today are called scanning electron microscopes. They can create 3D images of objects that are magnified 100,000 times larger. To put things in perspective, the compound light microscope that we use in biology can view objects 1,000 times larger than possible with the naked eye. The gray image on the side was taken with a scanning electron microscope. It's called a micrograph, and the objects that you see are actually grains of pollen. The cell theory is considered a unifying concept of biology because it's true for all living things. Your first key word is specialized. There are 3 parts of the cell theory. The first is that all living things are made of cells. The second part of the cell theory states that cells are the smallest working unit of all living things. This means that each individual cell is alive. Check out this video taken with an electron microscope of cells in action. So these are actual images of cells moving and going around in real time. So this is all footage that's being taken in real time. It hasn't been sped up or slowed down. The third part of the cell theory tells us that cells come from other cells by means of cell division. Before the cell theory, it was widely believed that cells and life in general could spontaneously develop. Along with other scientists, Virchow conducted research that proved new cells could only be formed by the division of pre-existing cells. So one cell had to come from another cell. What exactly is a cell? It's the smallest unit capable of performing life functions. Some examples of specialized cells are shown on this slide. So notice how the shape of the cell is going to determine its function. And your second key word is cells. Sometimes it's hard to visualize how small a cell is. It's reported that 37 million bacterial cells can fit on the head of a pin. However, not all cells are this small. Ostrich eggs are the largest cells found in nature. They can be about 6 inches long and weigh about 5 pounds. In this video, you see a great way of how we can visualize how small cells actually are. Even though cells have varied structures, depending on their function, there are some similarities between all cells. So what we're about to cover is going to be found in all cells, every single living cell on the planet. All cells share certain characteristics, one of which is that all cells need ribosomes to make proteins. Ribosomes are organelles without membranes, and they exist in the cells of all living things. All cells also contain genetic information in the form of DNA. This genetic information provides the ribosomes with instructions for making proteins. These proteins are used for building structures and controlling metabolism in all living things. All cells are also enclosed by a cell membrane, which forms the boundary of the cell and controls what enters and exits the cell. All cells are filled with a jelly-like substance called cytoplasm, and this supports and protects the working inner parts of the cell. Your third keyword is have. Cells can either be prokaryotic or eukaryotic. Prokaryotic cells are simple and are all unicellular organisms, meaning the organism is made of only one cell. Prokaryotic cells do not have a membrane-bound organelle because of their small size and simplicity. They do have ribosomes though, but remember, the ribosomes are not surrounded by a membrane. Living things can be classified into 6 different kingdoms. Prokaryotic organisms include 2 of these kingdoms, bacteria and archaea. There's a fun fact. Archaea are used to be considered a type of bacteria until the late 1970s, when more distinct genetic differences were observed between them. Another fun fact, the oldest sediment, which is 3.8 billion years old, contains ancient archaea fossils. Living things can be classified into 6 different kingdoms. Prokaryotic organisms include 2 of these kingdoms, bacteria and archaea. Here's a fun fact. Archaea used to be considered a type of bacteria until the late 1970s, when more distinct genetic differences were observed between them. Another fun fact, the oldest known sediment, which is 3.8 billion years old, contains ancient archaea fossils. One way to remember that prokaryotes have no nucleus or organelles is to remember that the prefix pro actually means before. Prokaryote literally means before the nucleus. You can also think pro, no nucleus. Your 4th keyword is A. More complex organisms are made of eukaryotic cells. Most living things are eukaryotic. Plants and animals are great examples. However, eukaryotic organisms also include fungi and protists. So remember, you are a eukaryote. Eukaryotic organisms can be unicellular or multicellular. Most species of algae are unicellular plants, and your favorite amoeba sisters are unicellular animals. However, most eukaryotic organisms are multicellular, like yourself. Eukaryotic cells contain tiny working parts called organelles. Organelles literally mean tiny organ. They're small subunits of a cell that carry out a specific function. They're surrounded by membranes, so you'll often hear them referred to as membrane-bound organelles. Your 5th keyword is specific. So let's get into each of these organelles. In eukaryotic cells, the nucleus contains genetic information in the form of DNA. Prokaryotes have DNA, but it is not contained in a nucleus. It floats freely around the cell and is referred to as a nucleoid. The nucleus has its own membrane that always allows materials to diffuse in and out. At the center of the nucleus is the nucleolus, which makes ribosomes. The function of the nucleus is to direct cell activities, so you can think of it as the brain of the cell. Ribosomes are the only organelles that are not bound by a membrane. They are found in all cells. Each cell contains thousands of ribosomes. In eukaryotic cells, ribosomes are located on the rough ER and floating freely in the cytoplasm. The function of ribosomes is to make protein. The mitochondria can only be found in eukaryotic cells. They have a double membrane, an inner and outer membrane that directly relate to its function of creating energy for the cell. You probably remember that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, or the nickname mighty mitochondria. The mitochondria uses sugar to produce energy in a process called cellular respiration. This process occurs in both plant and animal cells. Your 6th keyword is combination. The chloroplast is only found in plant cells. Animal cells do not have these organelles in their cells. Chloroplasts contain green pigment called chlorophyll, which absorbs energy from the sun. The chloroplast uses sunlight to make sugar, which the plant uses to grow and develop. So the plant is an autotroph that makes its own food. Golgi bodies, which are also known as the Golgi apparatus or the Golgi complex, are found in both plants and animals. These sac-like structures work together to process and package proteins and lipids in a cell. They move these materials around in sacs called vesicles. Your seventh key word is of. The endoplasmic reticulum, ER for short, is also found in all eukaryotic cells. There are two types of ER, the smooth ER and the rough ER. Smooth ER does not have any ribosomes on it and functions to transport lipids. The rough ER has ribosomes and functions to transport proteins. And this makes sense because ribosomes make proteins. Lysosomes are only located in animal cells. They are the garbage disposal of the cell. Lysosomes clean up the cell by getting rid of excess or worn out organelles, food particles, and bacteria or viruses. Vacuoles are located in all eukaryotic cells, but they appear differently in plants than they do in animals. In plant cells, there is a single large vacuole, and in animal cells, there are many small vacuoles. They contain water and nutrients and help with storage, digestion, and waste removal. In plant cells, the large vacuole also provides structure and support. So if you look at your image on the right, the plant cell is the one that's shown on top, and you can see the large central vacuole, and the animal cell is the cell on the bottom, and you see that one small vacuole. There's two there. Imagine there'd just be a couple spread throughout the cell. Your eighth key word is organelles. So now we're going to cover the cell wall. The last cell part is not really an organelle, but it is useful in distinguishing between plant and animal cells. A cell wall can be found in all prokaryotic cells, but only in eukaryotic plant cells. Animal cells do not have a cell wall. You do not have a cell wall because you are an animal and you're made up of animal cells. It is located outside of the cell membrane, and its function is to provide structure and protection for the cell. So when you think about it in plants, plants don't have bones like you do, but they need to still stand up straight. The cell wall is what helps them do this. So this is also why you, as an animal cell, do not have a cell wall. Just like all other animals on the planet do not have cell walls in their cells, just plants and prokaryotes. We've now finished our presentation on a cell's structure and function, so you can submit your video and move on to the next assignment.